Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. We want to help. Send your questions to info@collegeknowledge.net. These can be about college, finances, careers, and anything else you have questions on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my distinguished host, Mr. Joe Kearns.
Dave, always good to see you, sir.
Yeah.
Did you know, Dave, that there are 3 college majors that have the lowest average salary after graduation within 6 months of graduating? They all have $38,000 as the average salary. Those 3 college majors are liberal arts, performing arts, and theology.
Now, do they go in and talk about liberal arts? Because
they don't.
That's interesting to me because everybody poo-poos liberal arts educations. Mm-hmm. But now you're talking about a major in liberal arts. What does that define? Because I went to a liberal arts school and I studied business. So,
right.
Intriguing.
The other interesting side of this, though, that was pretty interesting. The same report also dictated, well, what's those average salaries later in life, like when kids become adults and they're now 35 to 45 years old, and those bottom 3 change drastically.
Really?
And it actually becomes early childhood education, general education, and elementary education are the lowest paying majors for 35 to 45 year olds. So talk about a shift.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd be like, again, not to get too into the weeds here, but I'd be interested in looking at, okay, so your early education, early childhood, or your elementary and private school versus public school, right? Because we have clients that are teachers that are in elementary school and they're not making $40K. They're making substantially more, but good stuff, Joe. All right. So everyone, today we have a distinguished guest and excited to have him on the show. His name is Jovan Hall. Jovan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Jovan, you're a student at Norfolk State. You're studying, you got a whole thing going on, but you're studying optical engineering along with a minor in electrical engineering. And then you're pursuing the master's, which I'm assuming is a direct entry program in electronics engineering with a concentration in photonics. Is that, you get that right?
It's a lot. Basically when I first came in as a freshman, I started studying optical engineering, which is the study of photons and how they interact with the real world. And then I've taken so many electrical engineering classes that I automatically get a minor in electrical engineering. Nice. And my university came to me and said, so what are you doing after you graduate? Because I actually graduated in May with my bachelor's. And they said, well, we want you to come back for a master's program and you already have credits as a master's student. So why don't you pursue a master's in electrical engineering here? And although we don't have an optical master's, electrical is pretty close. So we can give you this master's. It'll only get an extra year and you can graduate with both in 2025 with a master's and a bachelor's. So hey, I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah.
And that was at the inspiration of the school, a mentor, a counselor. Like who brought that to your world?
It was the head of the graduate program here at Norfolk State.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was technically, I want to say an advisor.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a mentor of sorts, right? Someone's watching out for you. Right. Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because in everybody we've talked to at every level of success has relied in some way or another on mentors or people to help guide. And I assume that, here you go, you're going to end up with a master's in electrical engineering and your bachelor's and someone's sort of inspiring you to do that, which I think is incredible. I guess the part that I'll say is don't ever lose that. Don't ever lose listening to the advice of people that have got your back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is why I really like what you do here. I don't know exactly, but you are a college advisor, and I think your jobs are extremely important because a lot of students I've noticed are lost when it comes to college and picking colleges.
Yeah. And it's not even they're just lost in that. They're lost in like, well, what do I want to do? What should I study? And I think there's this old sort of methodology that you got to be one of three things to be successful in life. And it's not that way. It's more about following the passion and creating some version of yourself with the passion that you have, getting the education to support it. Right. So,
yeah.
You also have a YouTube channel, right? And it's LFR JoJo, just so we're shout out to that. So anybody wants to see Jovan in action, you can go to LFR JoJo and check him out. You got a decent amount of subscribers. And what's the main focus of that? And how did you get there? Yeah,
I started my YouTube channel when I was 18 years old. I want to say right before I came to college. It was during the COVID year, so we were all at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I used to sell tennis shoes, so I saved up and bought a camera and just began recording. The main focus is politics on that channel, where I discuss certain tactics politicians use to maybe try to manipulate college students or try to manipulate a situation. And someone like me, I don't know much about politics, so all my reactions are purely organic, and I can just see all the manipulation live view, and I just commentate on it.
Got it.
And that was what attracted, me to your channel. I don't know how, one of those algorithms came across. I watched one of these and I'm going, the ability to critically think is something that I think has been lost for almost a generation. To not take things at face value, to read into, to ask questions, and your ability to naturally do that just attracted me to your video, your views on things, and how you then can articulate your side of the argument and where your argument comes from, not because someone told you to think that way. And I think that's what ultimately really drew me to you and wanted to definitely get you on the podcast. And I wanted to see, was that something that you learned? Was that something that was just natural for you? And also, how did that part, kind of take you along the path of choosing the college, choosing your major and things like that? I just wanted to know a little bit about your story. So it's you definitely got a great mindset. And this video, I think, is great because it's not the parroting that you typically hear, and you're able to back things up with just a solid, like you said, organic, right? But give your reasoning behind your thoughts. And I think it's something that, I don't want to say this generation, but for a long time, it's something that we've been missing. So I love seeing you do what you do on your channel. It's great.
Yeah. To answer the first question, yes, it is something that I learned. When you're in high school and middle school, I would say middle school specifically, there's always a path to follow. You go from 8th grade to 9th grade to 10th. But once I got to around 11th grade, forgot what age I was, maybe 16, 17, everyone's saying, go to college, do this. But you just have a sense of, you're not telling me everything I need to know.
Yeah.
And I played sports when I was in school, so every young man thinks they're going to the professional something, whether it's football, baseball, basketball. But once you get to a certain age, okay, I need to start being realistic about what I'm actually going to do. And when you talk to your advisors, they're like, oh, just go to college. But I was looking up the cost of colleges, and I said, how am I going to afford to go to college? And then I never had an answer. So that's when I began looking into things myself. And that's really when I learned that everything is not face value, because you have the advisors and they obviously care about me, but they're not telling me the full truth. And I didn't know why. So that's when I really began, okay, I can trust you, but I really need to put my life in my own hands in every situation.
Well, and it's funny because we use the term, Ronald Reagan coined it in I don't know when, but it was trust but verify, right? And at that time he was talking about the Soviet Union. It was like, hey, all right, we're going to move forward in a positive relationship, but we're going to trust you, but then we're going to verify that information. And I think your logic and reason behind, like, hey, I'm going to trust your advice, but I'm going to verify it, and I'm going to get the information myself so I can at least corroborate what you're saying in my own mind, right? And that is an art form in its own right, and it's also something that I don't think it's taught Jovan, right? I don't think they're telling you to do that. I think, and there you go back to, and I think it was it was Rockefeller. No, it was one of the robber barons, right, of the early 1900s, that were the billionaires, right? He said, I don't want an educated society. I want a society trained to work, right? Because his whole thing was he wants you to come in and he wants you to work. And I will figure out exactly who said that. Niall, if you would look that up for me while we're going on this, but I'm not looking for an educated society. Mm-hmm. I think it was Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, maybe. No, I'll check that out. But that's really what we get, right? You're talking about that path. You go 8th grade, you're going to 9th grade. 9th grade, you're going to 10th grade. 10th grade. And in sort of the historical baby boom generation, it was now you go to college. Now you go get that extra degree and you continue that education, not necessarily understanding why you do that. And so what did you discover as you started going down that pathway as to the advice is go to college, and why do you do it and how do you do it?
Yeah. So what I discovered is that a lot of the advice is good advice. Mm-hmm. However, I discovered that there's just a lot of things you aren't telling me. You tell me to go to college, and in my mind, and I'm unsure if the schools do this or maybe social media does this. In my mind, I look at my friends and they're like, okay, we're just going to go to college. Mm-hmm. But I realize it just can't be that simple. What do you mean go to college? How am I going to be able to pay for it? What are the interest rates? What should I major in? Where should I go? So I just discovered that at a certain age, you can't just take what people tell you and run with it like you did when you were 13, 14, 15. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that my generation, and I think we're a pretty smart generation in terms of what we know because we have access to Google and TikTok and YouTube, and we have access to more information. But when it comes to, like you said, critical thinking, you can't just take what they say as like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And when I ask questions like, why are you going here? Can you afford it? Like, I don't ask people if they can afford it, but I say, is it a smart decision? What are you majoring in? You kind of get backlash as if you crossed the secret barrier that you weren't supposed to cross. Yeah. So yeah, what I noticed is that it's that lack of critical thinking that's not even the right way to put it. They're like ignoring anything real when it comes to it and just expecting everything to work out.
Yeah, no, you said it. And Niall did look up that quote, and it was John D. Rockefeller. And he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. Yeah. Right. And so, they were founders in the education system, right? They created that. So, it's very interesting. And I love that you got there by yourself, saying like, I got to question some things. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a necessary evil in everything we do is to question everything. Right. I was, say 2016 to 2020, I was very affected by the news, right? I would read it and I would take it at face value. And then COVID hits and like, all of a sudden you're like, dude, what? Wait, we're doing what? Why are we doing that? What? We have to do what? 2 weeks 2 weeks to save the rest of the world or whatever it was. So we're just not going to do anything for 2 weeks. And that turns into a year and you're going, and now you're starting to see some of the realities of the truths of COVID and what actually happened and how it all worked out. And I don't see any accountability happening, right? I don't see anything actually taking place. We're just, it was what it was. Well, no, it wasn't. Like there was illegal stuff done across the board by every administration in the political powerhouses that did it. But it was the first eye-opening for me where like the cattle herd mentality just exists. You just do what you're told. And I think that's a very dangerous thing to do, to just do what you're told. So I love the fact that you're challenging that thought pattern you got there on your own.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on I didn't mean to cut you off, but what are your thoughts on my generation's ability to objectively think and not just do what they're told, but do what's best for them?
Well, I think you guys have been given a raw deal, right? And why I say that is Facebook was the OG, right? And so Facebook was a platform that you could have an opinion on, right? But then you got into the Instagrams and the Twitters and you got the TikToks and you got all this stuff, and it's like information overload. And so one of the biggest things that happens to anyone with too much information is analysis paralysis, right? You just end up being sort of numb to it. So you guys have been dealt the realities of life in a blitzkrieg fashion without the tools to sort and sift through the information. And you're basically left to fend for yourself and say, I got to figure out how to sort through it. And I think some people just quit on that, Jovan. So that's why I'm saying kudos to you for not quitting on it and saying, you can't just listen. Some guy has a great following and has an opinion, and all of a sudden that opinion somehow turns into fact, and it's just not. But you believe this person. And so, you just go with it. And I think it's that sort of just roll with it. And there was a critical, and I think it was the Obama administration that changed the law back to propaganda was sort of legalized again. And so prior to that, you weren't allowed to. I have to pull that up, Niall, another thing to look at. But there was some rule that protected sort of like the false information environment, but it wasn't by choice. I think it was by force, because now you would have to shut down and regulate Facebook. You'd have to shut down and regulate all these different places and fact check everything, which is what we got into, right? Well, that's the problem with society today is there's no fact check on anything. You can basically, if you have an opinion and a loud enough voice, we've made the voice exponentially easier to be loud. And so you're just sort of subject to whatever you feed. And then you add the AI algorithms to it. And like, oh, you liked this one? Check this out. Hold on. You like that too? I can just do this all day long.
Right.
And so now it's, they feed whatever beast or conspiracy theory that you're into. They're feeding it heavy and hot, and they're keeping going with it. And it's interesting too, because I had this opinion where I stopped watching the news, but I've really dug into documentaries. And documentaries are the new sort of influence peddling environment, because you're only getting the part of the documentary from the bias of whoever the director, the researchers are.
Yep.
So there's two sides to every story. That's what I was taught when I was young, right? I'd come back and be crying because my brother beat me or whatever. And I'd say, he did this. And then he always had his side of the story of what actually happened. And I think we're not getting both sides of the story. I think that's the big problem.
Right. And there's two sides to every story, and then there's the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I always look at it, the tough part that I think your generation has gone through, especially with social media, is exactly what Dave said, that opinion has become fact. And the reality is that opinion is the lowest form of knowledge. It requires no actual knowledge to be able to give an opinion on something.
True.
And opinions now have been taken as fact. And if you don't have the ability to ask 3 questions about how that opinion came to be, or to question that opinion to see if it truly is a fact or not, you don't know. Right. And I think that that takes work. And the old adage of people will read the headline and not the body. Right. That is kind of what has gotten into things. It's the headline is the opinion, and here's where that opinion was drafted from. Nobody wants to read all the difference. So it's not that I don't think this generation is poor in critically thinking, but I think it's everything that has been pushed towards you has fed you to stop doing that. It's almost been forced upon your generation. And again, it's kind of just, it's always there. I mean, it's not like it hasn't been there, but it's with how information is gathered now, it is just, that's what it is. There is, I mean, you look at a news network is nothing but opinions now. It is very rarely actual fact.
Well, let me ask you a question, Jovan. When you had to do reports and term papers in high school and now in college, do you still have to cite your resources and cite the facts of it? Like I had to put the Encyclopedia Britannica and stuff. And so you had to go into the fact-based stuff. So you cite the source, but now the question is, well, and maybe I'm ignorant in terms of when I used to go to the encyclopedia and take it as gospel. Maybe it wasn't gospel. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it wasn't factual, but we would cite those things. Now think about citing. You can cite someone's opinion,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're doing your work to cite it, but then you can back that opinion up with your critical thinking. So let's kick that same thing back to you. Where do you stand in all this? And like, how do you view it?
Okay, so I think you should cite all your all your references, especially when you're in school. I think that's not even a stated. You need to cite your references. Yep. After you learn enough about a topic, then you can start creating your own opinions or well-informed opinions. But you're definitely right. You can't just, and I noticed that with my generation too. It's like everything has to move so fast. But when it comes to learning a subject or gaining real deep knowledge, sometimes you just have to slow down. You do have to look up different references. You have to look up different thought processes. And then from there, you say, okay, I've learned enough about this. This is what I think about this. And I think this because of this. And with my major specifically, I don't do a lot of papers, but I do a lot of lab reports where at this stage in my academic career, I'm graduating next month. At a certain point, you can't just have an opinion on something. You have to have pure references. It has to be right. There's no gray area when it comes to math. It's either right or wrong. It is what it is.
Well, what I also think is a huge point for you, because you've had to use logic every step of the way to get where you are, right? You can't be an engineer and not have logical progression, mathematical progression, right? It's all based on logic. So is that a piece that's missing, right? Is it the logic that we're not teaching?
Yes, I feel, with my major, there's a right answer. Of course, there's opinions on why that is the answer, but we know that this is the answer. Whether we think it came this way or this way, it doesn't matter. When I look at a lot of other majors, I think that is missing. A lot of their professors, I would say, let them be wrong. They let them be wrong. They let the students not make sense and then accept it, where they should say, no, that's not what's happening. That is wrong. Whether or not you think it should be this way or not, that's a different discussion. But this is the answer. Is wrong. You can't think that. But that voice is gone now, because I think a lot of professors are scared, or maybe institutions are scared. See, this is me saying why it's happening. That's an opinion, but we know it's happening.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's that is incredibly insightful in terms of like letting people be wrong and being okay with people being wrong and not taking the corrective action. I mean, I think about like my own children, and they come home or they say something and you're like, dude, that's just not, you're not right. Like that is not how it works. And you correct it. But then, and you get to that higher ed and very astute in terms of like, professors are scared right now. They're certainly scared. There is so much attention on higher education, whether it's worth it, whether it's not worth it. Should you go? What should you study? And this sort of group think, like, let's talk it out, but not in a productive way. Let's try and back up and support the opinion that was generated here. And let's not cause what I like to call positive conflict. Like, conflict is necessary, right? When you in engineering and experimentation and stuff, like, you're trying things, you fail at things, then you figure out the way to do it. I mean, Thomas Edison, brilliant in it, yeah, but his whole thing is he figured out 200 ways to make a light bulb. He needed to find one way to make it work, right? So he failed 200 times before he got the answer. And I think that's the part when you bring back that letting people be wrong, we're not saying that you failed, and that's okay. It's a good thing. You should fail, because it takes many failures to get to success, but we're allowing the failure to be sort of swept under the rug as not a failure. And then you never understand how to fail, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. Especially with my generation, I was always taught to respect elders. That's an older term, respect your elders. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because when it comes to university or high school, you're supposed to be wrong. You're 18, 19, 20. You're fresh into a subject. You're supposed to be wrong. And when it comes to respecting elders, they're masters in your field. They're supposed to say, no, you're wrong. Redo it. And you're supposed to say, okay, why am I wrong? And then from there, but I feel like with my generation, since you're 17, 18, 19, and you're on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, and you're in an echo chamber all the time. And then when you get to school, the teachers aren't telling you that you don't make sense because maybe they don't want to lose their job. I don't know. So by the time you're 23, 24, you've not really been told that you've been wrong for the past 10 years. So I think that's a real problem too.
We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started.
Well, and it certainly has its consequence in your professional life, because I'll tell you what, I own several companies and I tell people they're wrong all the time, but I also am the first person to say I was wrong. And so that's a tough pill to swallow. If you don't know how to take you're wrong, like there's emotional baggage that comes with that first time being told you're not right, being 24, 25 years old.
All right, a couple of things I want to unpack there. So number one, Jovan, I just wanted to check. Did you just make sure you were saying respect your elders with Dave? I'm sorry.
You know what?
I had to pull that up. I know you didn't. He's only a year older than me. I just wanted to pull it up. But no, when we were talking about like the kids being wrong, right? Kids are wrong all the time. Right. And professors not being able, where I have seen genius, and something I try to do with my kids, or even with people that work with us that I try to help, is I don't just tell them they're wrong, but I'll start asking questions. Why did you say that? Why do you believe that? All right, well, what if this happened? And all of a sudden they realized they were wrong. And that is so much more powerful. Like that's where I've seen really good teachers. And I can name you the teachers that I had in high school where it was that mentality. You could go into one class and a teacher would say, you're wrong. Right. But then wouldn't it necessarily explain why? But the best teachers that I've ever had in my life, and not just in school, but in professions, have gotten me to a point where I have realized that I was wrong without telling me I was wrong. So tell me how you came to that conclusion. Right. Well, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you look this up? How was this response? And then I go, oh, I missed it. You're right. I was wrong. They didn't even tell me I was wrong. They just followed it up with questions. And that's what I try to do with my kids. Like if they come home and they say, oh, this is there, I'm checking their homework. Let's go through it. And if they can figure out that they were wrong, it's a lot easier for them to accept it rather than me just telling, yeah, you're wrong. And now they have to simply accept it. So I don't know if that's also something that's missing, but I've seen a few, clips of professors that have been able to just completely give a 180 of an opinion just by asking 3 questions to a student. Right. And that's something, if professors aren't willing to do that, then that's, I think, something that is pretty dangerous. Right. Like if you can't just back up your opinion, if you can't get people to understand certain things are right and wrong and that there is right and wrong, and you can't get somebody there, I think that's pretty dangerous where we get to. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on there.
Sorry, Niall did look up that act that I was talking about. And we'll get back to that in a second. The one about the Obama administration, what they changed in the propaganda world.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
Well, now that I've popped the shell off that, we'll talk about it. 2013, Barack Obama signed and updated the U.S. Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, commonly known as the Smith-Mundt Act. The original legislation was designed to govern how the U.S. disseminates information abroad to counteract propaganda from other nations. Essentially, it established the framework for U.S. international broadcasting and cultural exchange efforts. The update effectively lifted the long-standing ban on domestic dissemination of information, meaning materials such as reports, articles, and broadcasts originally produced for audiences outside the U.S. could now also be made available within the U.S. The intent behind the change was to modernize the legislation reflecting changes in technology and communication. It allowed the U.S. citizens to access the same information that the U.S. was disseminating internationally, thus increasing transparency and allowing the U.S. taxpayers to see what's being funded. But it essentially allowed you to just blast information, right? Which is, and I think it was necessary because there's nothing you can do to control it, right? It's like AI. I talk about this all the time. You're not putting AI back in the box. Genie's out of the bottle. We'll figure out where it goes, but you're not undoing that. And so we're going to have to change rules to allow for it to do what it's going to do, right? So sorry, I just wanted to clarify that piece. We're going
a breath.
We're going
a million
deeper.
miles a minute here.
So what do you see as the solution to this? And in your pursuit of higher education, what did you look for to ensure that you weren't getting the echo chamber effect?
Yeah. In engineering, I would say it's kind of hard to get an echo chamber because my study is usually you're right or wrong. If you're building a circuit, you're going to know if that circuit works.
Yeah, it works or doesn't work, right?
However, I would say in order to avoid being lied to, just look up a different opinion. Let's say, because I do YouTube videos on a lot of politics. So a lot of the times I don't know if what they're telling me is true. And I would stop the video right then and there and look it up on my phone. And if I find a conflicting opinion, I would say it in the camera. Oh, I found out this. What do y'all think about this? Or if my subscribers would tell me, or I would keep looking it up. So I would say you just have to be willing to subject yourself to being wrong. I think that's an area that I noticed that a lot of my peers don't want to subject themselves to. And I'm unsure why, because we're young. Even when you're older, it doesn't matter. You're wrong. Nobody's going to judge you for being wrong. We're all humans. Yep. But just subject yourself, even when it comes to college, when you're picking a college. Let's say you wanted to go to this school, but you found out that they weren't the best for your major, or you found out that they're slightly above your budget. You can't just say, well, I already told everyone I was going there. I have their new sweater that came out. No, say, okay, I was wrong. I'm going somewhere else.
I love it. I mean, it's so simple and so logical that it shocks me that there's not more of it, but I understand why there isn't more of it, right? And you know, there's this other little gem, and I don't know what generation started it, but I certainly had some of it in my lifetime, which was the old participation award, right? Which is like, hey, you just get rewarded because you were there. So that's just reiterating that fact that, yeah, you were there, you didn't win, but you still got rewarded for the non-win or the non-activity. So like, I think there's some of that in it too. And I think to really bring it full circle, it's trying to balance that the dangers of mental health issues at the same time to not unwind the logic and the thinking that must exist, right? Life can be hard sometimes. There's no doubt about it. And I don't mean to diminish anybody's mental health issues that they struggle with or any of that stuff, but I think we've gone, it used to be rub some dirt on it back in the day, right? And to now like, oh no, let's go to the urgent care and figure out what's up. And so there's some balance here that we're not getting as a society. It's not in balance. It's ultra protective. You talk about helicopter parents and all of that. There's lawnmower parents that have been as a new term. I don't know if you ever heard this, but
lawnmower parents.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the distinction. Like a helicopter parent is like on you, like, oh, don't do, oh, careful, right? They're all around you. And then the lawnmower parent is the one that never stops that and suffocates and actually cuts the kid down in reality because it never allows them to grow. So it's a different concept, different spin on that whole thing. So again, I think there are two things. If you've never heard of the two subjects, anybody listening, like think about it in terms of like, are you a helicopter? One of the hardest things as a parent to do, Joe, and you know this, is to let your kids fail. But it is the most necessary thing ever for them to go through because it teaches the coping mechanisms. It teaches the ways to overcome that. And like, Jovan, I don't know how many books or stuff you've read on success, but every single book on success talks about the grit it takes to be successful. And that determination, that willingness to fail. You go back to Rocky. It's not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get back up. Like, so I think that's some of, we're blending a lot of topics into it, but, and it goes right back to the professors. Like, I don't want to lose this job. I love this job. So I'm not going to get some kid that has at the end of the semester gets the ability to write up that I have been a mean, bad professor. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So like there's a dangerous game we're playing.
And the other side of that too. So we had on one of the episodes a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about just national test scores.
Yeah.
And high school GPAs are at an all-time high. Right.
Really?
But our SAT scores are at an all-time low. And it's simply because of like what you were stating, that high school teachers are basically like they're giving out high grades to kids that don't deserve it. So colleges are now struggling that, okay, the GPA is almost this inflated fake number. And now the SAT became optional. What do they have to really gauge on accepting students? And now that a lot of schools are coming back being SAT required is what we're starting to see. But that reality that you're mentioning, like that professors don't want to tell kids that they're wrong. Well, it's obviously been happening in high school across the country, because if test scores have gone up, more kids haven't been right. They haven't gotten smarter because the standardized test scores have been dropping the same time that the GPAs have been going up. And I think that it leads right to that. And now is that just starting to leak its way into college? And now you've had these kids that have been 4 years that have been able to get by. And I don't want to say cheat, but kind of say, oh, well, I'm right. And oh, yeah, OK, well, I'll give you credit for that. So I don't have to face any type of backlash from parents or a board. And now it's leaking into college because these kids are putting up a stink. And like you said, participation trophy is immediately where my mind went when we were talking about this. But it was very interesting stats that over the past, I know we can pull it up. But I think back in the 80s, like the average GPA was like a 3.1. And now we're at the average GPA is like a 4.2. Like it's insane. Like it is absolutely insane. It's just because of lowering the standards for a higher grade. It's not actually a representation of knowledge as our kids are getting smarter. So
Jovan, let me ask you a question on opinion, because you have a YouTube channel, you got a good following, right?
Yeah.
On campus, like, do you face backlash? Do you get to have good civil discourse and discuss things back and forth, right? Or do you find it to be like people are sort of not willing to have the conversation? Because if you read the news in higher ed, it's always about this school's protesting this and it turns violent because this faction wouldn't talk to this faction. Like I remember sitting in philosophy classes and the whole class was based on us having dissenting opinions and discussing them. And, oh, well, that's a good point. Doesn't change my opinion, but it's a good point you make. It's something for me to think about, and being able to just say that, like, oh, never thought of it that way, or interesting. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of hard to have civil debates when it comes to politics, because what I've noticed is that most people aren't actually debating what you said. They're debating who you are as a person. So let's say we're talking about a new law or a new stance of a politician, who you're voting for, or anything. I would say, why do you support this? And they say, well, why don't you support this? Do you hate whatever? I'm saying,
right.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Can I get?
Yeah, no, but it's true. Well, but you hear, I mean, that's the argument that politicians make right now. It's what is being said. That's a parroting, right? That's the idea of like a gun law, right? You hear, oh, I don't agree in the, limiting people's right to own a firearm. You must like people, killing kids if you're not for, like, that's something politicians actually say, right? I have heard that you stand against, you're for the killing of children.
Yeah, you like mass murders.
Where did that come from? But that's something that it's like, whoa, how did we get to that from a legal discussion on owning a firearm or not? Like, whoa, what the heck? But you hear that thing and it is crazy. But I think when that goes by the wayside and it isn't shot down right away, if you have someone that kind of believes that, well, now they see that and they can take that as their argument. And that's now how they reform arguments that aren't actually well thought out. It's all emotionally driven.
Yeah.
And it's it's crazy. I don't know. Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. So now we're debating on if I'm actually a good person when what does it have to do? I thought we were debating a specific topic. Now the debate is, are you a good person? It's strange. So I just avoid. I'm not debating.
Yeah. And I assume, and that's one of the beauties of the platform of YouTube, of all this, is you don't have to debate. You can put it out there and people can either be part of it or not be part of it. But I think there's also a problem in that, right? There's also a problem that because the voice is amplified beyond what it has ever been, right? If you get a following, you have a voice. And Jovan, I'm not speaking to I'm talking to YouTube and the Twitters and Instagrams as a whole. Because you have the voice, you can influence, right? I think the concept of the influencer is just tragic, right?
Yeah.
Because what is a parent's biggest fear? Your kid has a bad influence. Now we're supporting influencing as a cultural thing. I'm an influencer. Yeah. Like, it's a job. My job is to trick you, to influence you away from what your belief system is, or to influence you to lean into your beliefs. And like, it's bizarre in its own sort of conceptual acceptance, right?
Man.
Yeah, and I've seen this happen in a lot of schools too, where especially in the Black community, there's a lot of rappers, and you're inviting these rappers to schools. And I have nothing against rap. Like, we all listen to rap music, but when 100%. You have a very vulgar artist, and you're saying, yeah, come into my middle school. Are you serious?
Yeah, like you have the language label, like the explicit label on stuff, and you're not like, it's like, it'd be like, and I think this is another problem. Like, you talk about video content, you talk about like true videos, and parents just allowing their kids to be exposed to way too much stuff way too early in life that you otherwise would. It's just illogical to allow it to happen, but it just does, right? Man, there's so much to unpack.
So I was curious. So I think when you started your YouTube channel, I think one of the first videos I think I went back and saw is that you were just commenting on like a top 10 like best rappers of all time, and now it's very political. When did that shift happen? And was there a specific moment or a specific something that you saw that said, hey, I'm going to start commenting on the political side of things? Was there something that stood out to you that was like, I got to do this. I'm tired of hearing this, or I got to give a dissenting opinion? I was curious about that.
Yeah. So when I first did music, what I noticed is that the music industry is very dark. It's very dark. And in my head, I was just getting like to the point where I just told myself, I don't want to do this anymore. It's ironically too much politics in music rather than it is in politics, where a company will block your video if you say something that they don't like. You have fans threatening you if you don't like the music. And then it gets to the point where if you don't say a specific thing, people would attack you. And I don't mind. You can say what you want about me online. I'm posting online, but in my head, I was like, it's this music. Why are you attacking me? So as I got older, I noticed a lot of things.
Which is the only place in life you can have an opinion. Like, you like, I like that music, or I don't like that music.
It's like a piece of art. It's subject to an opinion. That's what it's supposed to be. It's subjective. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it was weirdly political. And then when I turned 21, I noticed things in my life where, the friends you grow up with, they start taking different opinions, and I start taking different opinions. And that was around, it was a little after COVID, and the political realm during that time was very hot. And I've seen things happening in society, and I'm saying, this is obviously wrong. Why are people supporting this?
Yep.
I don't understand. So I started doing videos about it, talking about it, asking questions about it, and I liked it, and I stuck with it.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I love the way you put it. You didn't understand it, so you started asking questions, and that is key. We do not ask enough questions anymore. Everybody, the opinion is the answer, is someone's answer. Stop with your opinions and start with your questions, and that's how you get to the truth.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah, good.
Do you two have any advice for upcoming? Well, let me phrase the question this way. How do you advise upcoming high schoolers? Do you start at high school? Do you start at middle school when it comes to picking a college or picking a major?
Yeah, I mean, our advice is very simple. You have to find the best academic, social, and financial fit. And that is the best fit school. So we don't start with academics or the social environment or the finance. It's sort of all three at the same time in like, hey, great. So you're a really smart kid and you can go to this school, but you can't afford it. So that's a loss. Or, hey, this is a really expensive school. You can afford it, but you're not going to like the social environment, right? That's a loss because you're going to want to transfer. You're going to leave. Our whole goal is get in, get out, and get living, right? Like it's not about taking the 7-year path. It's not what happens in most instances is if you make the wrong choice academically, social, or financially, it has a long-standing effect. Whether it has you're in school for too long, that could be one thing. You owe too much against your education, that could be another thing. Whether you're just miserable and you graduate with a mental health problem that you didn't have when you went there, but you ended up with it because you were just so unhappy, but you couldn't stand the thought of telling your parents or telling society or feeling like you quit on something, right? So ours, I mean, it's pretty simple to us. Academic, social, and financial. If those three are, if you approach it with those three things in mind, that you're going to be happy, you're going to be satisfied, you're going to work harder, you're going to be motivated more, you're going to find yourself in the right place. And I think the other piece that I'll say is the more you think about something, the better the outcome. And I'm not talking like agonize over the decision, or I'm talking think about it. Like, what do I really like? Who am I as a person? If you understand yourself, right, you can use that to your advantage. You know what you like. You also know what you don't like. So start with what you don't like. Hey, I don't like this. I'm not going to put myself in that situation to do that. I think you have to. One of the things I've always said is in society, we don't teach our children to think critically. We just don't. There's no class for critical thinking. If you go to a high level psychology class, like 400 level class in college, you can probably get a critical thinking class. There's one of those, what's the greatest courses ever taught? There's that, you ever see best courses? You can buy them, but there's one on critical thinking that's been circulated. But if you don't have that critical thinking mentality and you're not taught to critical think, you won't. Right. So I think a lot of it is like, hey, know you. If you've got knowledge of self, you can make this decision pretty easily. And if you're realistic about, I think people chase, we talk about this all the time too, Jovan, which is, fit over fame. Right. Find the fit. Don't go for the fame of the school, right? You're going to go to Harvard. Is that the fit for you? Is that the right place for you? Right. Find the fit, because a happy, satisfied, educated individual becomes a productive, happy, satisfied, educated adult. Like that's just what it comes down to. Right.
I mean, a lot of the advice that we give, I don't think we typically would start more in middle school. But when you get to the high school level, it's essentially you want to start having conversations about college. You want to start having conversations about what you potentially want to do. And if there's a career that you want that doesn't involve college, is that truly the best pathway? Right. It's a conversation. But if college is the pathway that you're going to be taking, it takes work. It is not a simple decision. It takes time, and the more time and effort you put into it, the better the result will always be. We always say start with a very wide net. Cast a very wide net. Don't ever fall in love with a college before you know if they have fallen in love with you. Right. You joke about this. You visit the first college you go to and you say, that's where I want to go. You buy the sweatshirt at the bookstore and that's it. And then you don't know if you get in or you get in, but it's 3 times the amount you can afford and you still want to go there, but you're going to be in debt for the rest of your life because of it. So it's ultimately figuring out, what you want to do and then just casting this wide net and starting to find out all the traits of a college that you want, starting to narrow that list down to that social, academic, and financial fit. And financial fit, one of the areas that we really help people with is it's not always what the sticker price of the school is. We know that schools will go from up here and give you money to make it more affordable. So the schools that you're looking at, can that price be shifted? Is it actually affordable when you think it's not? So don't rule a school out. You know, this is the time of the year that I love, when kids are finally getting their awards and finding out where they're going to be going. And this past week, I had 3 families end the conversation with, thank you so much, because if it wasn't for you, we would not have even have looked at this school because we thought it would be too expensive, you know, and it's cheaper than an in-state state school in all 3 cases, you know, schools that are $80,000, $90,000 a year. So that's what we try to really help families understand. But it takes work. It is not something that you start, you know, heading into the summer of senior year. You're way behind the ball if you haven't even started to visit and have discussions and really have a game plan in force at that point.
So, Jovan, what was your experience in high school? Like, how did you go through the process? You seem to have found a good home. You've got a mentor. You're going to end up with a master's in 5 in the course areas. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah. My parents were a lot of help for me. And I really accredit my mother, because she told me straight up, I have 3 siblings. She came to me and said, we don't have enough to send you to school, so you're going to have to do this. And I really appreciate her honesty, for one, because I was around 16, maybe 17 when she told me that. And from then on, I said, okay, I need to make sure my grades are the highest. I ended up graduating with a 4. I started laughing because you talked about the GPA theory, so it's kind of funny. But my SAT was around the 13 range, because I really stepped into what I had to do, and she helped me apply to schools. And the way I got to where I am now is because I already went to a science and technology high school that you had to apply for around the 8th grade. So I was there, and I had engineering programs reaching out to me when I was in 11th, 12th grade, saying, we want you to come to our program. So it all just worked out when it came to that.
Well, I mean, and you say somehow it all worked out, but credit to your mother, right? She had a tough conversation with you, like, hey, we can't afford this. Most kids hear that and they go the other way. Like, oh, well, it's not going to be for me. I don't have the opportunity. You said, okay, that means I got to get the grades. It means I got to get the SAT. It means I got to get this so that I have the opportunity to go do it. So you stepped up to that challenge, which is, and again, I don't know you or your parents in any depth, but that sounds like good upbringing to me, to rise above challenges, right? That sounds like the right things were instilled in that. And I think that's what is needed to make a critical decision. So fortune favors the prepared mind, no matter what, in what area, right? So you were the prepared mind. And so it wasn't just dumb luck or happenstance. It was through that progression, right? You made the choice to apply to the STEM school. You made the choice to apply yourself and graduate with high marks. You made the choice and took the SAT and did well on the SAT, right? So like that's the stuff that matters.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that my parents were just honest with me instead of saying, okay, we can send you anywhere. Then when I get to the point, I'm like, oh, I'm left stranded.
Yeah. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of parents make, is they don't want to talk the financial picture with the kids. And it's one that has to be had. You know, that is definitely one. We don't want to talk money with our kids. Right. And it's, you know, it's always, you don't talk money, politics, you know, religion, right? We don't want to talk money to our kids. And then all of a sudden you get to this decision where, oh, are you now going to be the bad parent that says you got into the school of your dreams, but we can't afford it? Or is it easier to lessen that blow if you had that conversation 2 years prior? Look, we have to choose a school that is financially affordable. Great. You know, like we know I'm not the bad guy. It's the school didn't bring enough money to the table, right? Like you kind of switch who the enemy is. You don't have to be the bad parent by just having that conversation. So that's a good one.
I could do this all day.
Yeah.
I could literally do it all day, but we are out of time for today. I know we did a lot of talking. You got us monologuing. We were supposed to get the opposite here, but love to have you back on the show sometime in the future and do it again, because I think and I'd love to talk to you next time about hopefully when we do it, you'll be in the master's program and we could talk about that transition and how all that worked out too. Cause I don't think a lot of people understand what an opportunity that is to come out and have that master's and how it's going to play out. So,
I mean, what career opportunities you have ahead of you? Would love to digest and get into that in the future as well.
Yeah, It was nice talking to both of you. You're both obviously very intelligent and accomplished. So I learned a lot.
Hey, love it, man. Yeah. And I keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop. Don't stop the logic. Don't stop the fight. None of that. Like we need it back. And the more voices we have that are saying, hey, this doesn't make sense, you got to question things, the better we're going to be.
Hey, thank you.
All right, everybody. This is College Knowledge.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Just a reminder, if you're sending your student to school, visit elitecollegiateplanning.com for free resources and to book a free consultation.